baby, don't stop. I party like a drum. I create the world in the womb I am. Make her at the pills, make her at the man. I am the greatest, the great I am. The lion and the lamb, lion and lamb. If you wanna wake up, there's places I could take you. Lost in the dream of what comes after the afterlife. Boom, bop, body like a bass drop. Gon' give it to you, baby, don't stop. I party like a drum. On top, boy, take it like a hold up. Gon' give it to me, baby, don't stop. I party like a drum.
What's going on, everybody? We're back with another build guide, but today we're switching it up. I know everybody loves the poison landslide, but we had to try out this tornado build that everybody has been talking about. I know going into the season with all the nerfs, people didn't think it was going to be relevant, but they were wrong. This build absolutely slaps. Not only is this build tanky, it's also beefy. We're building into maximum life and we're upwards of 16,000 max HP. And on top of it, we are doing a ton of damage. Day one on this build, without ever having played it before, we're level 97 and we were slamming through tier 100 Nightmare Dungeons. We haven't tried Uber Lilith with it yet, but I definitely plan to. Guys, I promise, if you can find the Tempest Roar and you want to switch it up, I highly recommend trying this build out. As always though, if you liked the video, don't forget to like the video. Go ahead, drop a comment, let me know what you think, some improvements I can make, or a video you'd like to see. And most of all, make sure you sub to the channel and you click that bell so you know every time I'm posting new content. Alright, now let's talk skill tree. We go ahead and put 1 point into Storm Strike and only 1 point into Enhanced Storm Strike. Then we come down here and max out Tornado, and you want to go into Raging Tornado. Now with Raging Tornado, you have a chance to make enemies vulnerable for 3 seconds, replacing the need for Fierce Storm Strike. That way you're always doing vulnerable damage even when Exploit doesn't proc. But you do want to make sure to be using Storm Strike and basic attacking, because you gain 15% damage reduction for 3 seconds after dealing damage with Storm Strike. I think this is one thing that a lot of people forget about. So not only are you going to be gaining some of your spirit back, but it is also making you tankier. There, we put a point in the Heart of the Wild just so we can get to Wild Impulses for that extra damage. Then down here, we're going to go 3 points into Predatory Instinct for the extra critical strike chance. Then we want 3 points into Digigate. That way you have that extra movement speed while you're in werewolf form and for 3 seconds after. And honestly, you're probably not out of werewolf form for more than 3 seconds at a time. So you're always getting an extra 9% movement speed, which is huge. Then for defensive skills, I go into Blood Howl. Blood Howl is great because it is going to be healing you for 20% of your maximum life, 3000 HP every time you use it, and it's almost always off cooldown, making it easier to stay in some of those crazy fights, giving you a ton of sustain. Every kill that you get with it reduces the cooldown by 1 second. The cooldown is only 11 seconds to begin with, so it comes up every couple seconds, or literally it's right back depending how many mobs are around you. Then I go into Preserving Blood Howl. I like the extra attack speed from this. It allows me to cast more tornadoes more quickly and auto attack faster, obviously. But if you're having issues with spirit, I would recommend going into Innate Blood Howl. That way you get the extra 20 spirit back. It really just depends if you're having spirit issues or not. I don't view it as that big of an issue for me, so I didn't go into it. Then I like Debilitating Roar. This is because I get nearby enemies have their damage dealt reduced by 70% for 4 seconds. I know a lot of people go into Cyclone Armor. It does a little bit of damage around you, knocking people back. It gives you 10% non-physical damage reduction. And then every 10 seconds for 2 seconds, you get an extra 30% damage reduction. For me, though, personally, I think that you're getting a much bigger benefit from Debilitating Roar because you are getting 70%. Even at max over here, it's only 40%. And the cooldown is 14 seconds versus 17 seconds. And on top of it, Preserving gives you 4% of your maximum life for each second of its duration. So I'm getting 635 HP per second for its duration, helping me stay in those fights for that much longer. Again, some people do like Cyclone Armor. You can play between these two and pick which one you want, but I would definitely go one or the other. Then I go into Ancestral Fortitude. That way I can get the Vigilance, giving me another 15% damage reduction, which is just about always proccing, because either you're always going to try to keep Cyclone Armor up, you're going to be constantly calling in Bloodhowl, and then you're also going to be spamming Debilitating Roar as well. This build doesn't utilize companion aspects at all, so we just go ahead and completely skip over there. Then down here, we're going to go into Hurricane. Hurricane is really nice because a Savage Hurricane, again, you're getting 20% extra damage reduction while Hurricane is up. We're going to put a point into Exposure. That way, it has a better chance of keeping stuff vulnerable. This will count towards your tornadoes and towards your hurricane. And then Endless Tempest. That way, your hurricane lasts a little bit longer as well. Then down here, we're going to go into Neurotoxin. That way, poison enemies are slowed. Then Venom Venom. That way, we are doing 30 to 60% extra critical strike damage. You should be at 60% with the Venom ranks on your amulet. If you don't have it on there, you're still at 30% and it's still doing a ton of extra damage for you. And then we put 1 point into Toxic Claws. Just that way you are able to proc that poisoned damage a little bit more often. For ultimate skills, we want to go into Grizzly Rage. Grizzly Rage is huge for this build, and then obviously you're going to max that completely out. There is no use for any of the other ultimates. Grizzly Rage 100% is what you're going to want to be using. Then I put 3 points into Defiance for the extra 12% to Elites. Circle of Life, that way we are healing ourselves, again, 3% of our maximum life every time we use a nature magic skill that consumes spirit. This build is all about just self-sustaining with the amount of health that we get based off of our passives and off the abilities that we're using. It allows us to stay in these fights for a really long time, take massive damage, and then just constantly heal ourselves right back up. Then we want to go 2 points into Defensive Posture, 1 point into Nature's Resolve. That way we can get to Unrestrained, where we throw 3 points into there. And then for our key passive, we are going to go into Perfect Storm. Perfect Storm is the best for the extra damage that you're doing, and then also just for that spirit regen. A lot of people like to go into Earth and Might. I've tested both, and personally, I just think that Perfect Storm works a lot better. We do move our spirit boons around a little bit. We stay with Wariness, 10% damage reduction from elites, but then we are going to go into Iron Feather. Iron Feather is huge for this build because we are building into max life. You gain 14% maximum life with this. So right now we're at almost 16,000, 15,866. If we were to take that off, then we drop all the way down to 14,200. It is definitely extremely beneficial and worthwhile to have Iron Feather with all of our abilities that are healing us off of our total life and not just our base life. Then we go into Calamity. Calamity is great because it extends the duration of our Grizzly Rage, allowing us to do a lot more damage, take a lot less damage. Hands down the best one to use here. We keep Calm Before the Storm because obviously you're getting your Grizzly Rage back a little bit more often. And then Masochist is huge. Critical strikes with shape-shifting skills have up to a 75% chance to heal you for 3% max life. Again, we're building into so much max life and we're hitting a ton of crits that you're proccing that 3% all the time. And this really helps you sustain in those fights a little bit longer. Then for gear, the one unique you have to have is Tempest Roar for the helm. I know it is a lot of RNG whether you find this or not. Some people it takes them all the way to level 80 or 90. Other people like myself have found 3 or 4 along the way. It really is just pure luck. Certain dungeons will help you get it more quickly, but it's not guaranteed. So you do need to have Tempest Roar for this full build to work. Then for gear, the one unique you're going to have is Tempest Roar. Tempest Roar eludes a lot of players, and it is all RNG whether you can get it or not. But once you get it, this build truly comes together. It doesn't really work without it, so hopefully you're able to find it early on. I know some people like myself, I found 3 of them throughout leveling. Other people are level 85, 90. They still haven't found it. So this build does unfortunately revolve around Tempest Roar. But after that, on our chest, you're going to want to run triple damage reduction and then max life. If you can't get triple damage reduction, then you're going to want total armor, max life, total armor, and then double damage reduction. This build is all centered around maximum life on your gear. That is another reason that I made the change to rubies instead of the sapphires for the damage reduction on fortified. We're going to max life. My Paragon board and my gear all centered around max life, as well as the abilities obviously from before. We are sitting at almost 19,000 max life, which is absolutely massive. And for the aspect, you're going to want to run Disobedience, even though it was nerfed coming into Season 1, still hands down one of the best defensive aspects in the game. For gloves, you are going to want Attack Speed, Rings of Tornado, Lucky Hit, and the preferably Critical Strike chance. I haven't been able to roll into that yet, but that would be your God tier roll. And then you're going to use Storm Chaser's aspect. That way you can have the maximum 3 tornadoes seeking out targets. After that, for pants, you're going to want double damage reduction, total armor, and max life. Again, if you can trade out the total armor for damage reduction, but at least triple damage reduction. Most important thing, max life. I did get a really low roll on my max life, so I'm leaving a lot of life on the table, but still the best roll I've been able to find so far. And then you want Aspect of Might on those. That way you get the extra 20% damage reduction when using basic skills. That also couples with Storm Strike, so you're really getting 35% extra every time you're using your basic skills. Then from there, on your boots, you're going to want movement speed, total armor while in werewolf form, since you are pretty much always in werewolf. Movement speed after killing an elite, and then damage reduction while injured. Damage reduction while injured is huge for this build. Granted, you are staying pretty much full HP the majority of the time, but when you're sitting at 19,000 HP, you can literally, anything under about 6,500 HP is going to proc that injured, so it allows you to stay in the fight if you're waiting until one of those heals or those abilities come back up. You are going to be insanely tanky and still have a ton of breathing room as far as life is concerned. Then on those, you're going to want Dark Howl. This way, it gives you an extra stun to poison enemies every time you're using Debilitating Roar. Then on your amulet, you're going to want to use Dire Wolf's Aspect. This is going to be huge because it's going to give you some extra movement speed, but then also give you a huge reduction to your spirit cost and heal you as you kill people. Now, this is one of the reasons I don't go spirit cost reduction on any of my gear, because I'm in Grizzly Rage so often. I don't really run into spirit issues because of this. And it allows me to go into more utility and more damage instead of having to worry about the spirit side of things. Then for stats, you're going to want cooldown reduction, movement speed, rings to NM Venom, and then most of all, you're also going to want total armor while in werewolf again to make you a little bit tankier. I couldn't find the perfect roll. Dexterity wasn't the worst stat to have, so this is the amulet that I'm using for now. On both of our rings, we will want the same thing. You're going to want Lucky Hit, Critical Strike chance, vulnerable damage, and then maximum life. Again, this build is all about max life for that sustain, and then crit chance. That way, your tornadoes can just keep stacking all of that critical strike damage on top of each other. For aspects, you're going to want to go Rampaging Werebeast. That way your Grizzly Rage can last even longer. I didn't get the best roll so far on this, but hopefully I can get it to 5 seconds. That way I'll be doing that much more damage because it does increase your critical strike damage by 10% for the duration, but then also it'll be on cooldown even less of the time because it is on cooldown while you're popping it. Then for weapons, you're going to want to go a one-handed and then a totem. This is definitely the best combination for the Tornado build. Personally, right now, I am using Flesh Render just because I haven't found the ideal one-handed so far. The best one-handed that I have right here is this one that has willpower, vulnerable damage. But again, you don't want critical strike damage or critical strike damage with earth skills, obviously. The ideal roll is going to be willpower, all stats, core skill damage, and then vulnerable damage. And then I also have a perfect roll on that aspect, which I don't want to wait. You're going to want to use the accelerating aspect, where every time you get a critical strike with a core skill, your attack speed increases. So for now, I'm using Flesh Render. If you have Flesh Render, it is a good supplement, but it doesn't make or break the build in any way. I definitely would still prefer an axe. Just don't have the best axe yet. So that's why we're using this. Also, you want willpower and then you want all stats. All stats specifically is going to help you out a ton with getting the extra procs on the Paragon board. My Paragon board is more based around survivability. That's why I have my life so high. I go into some damage spots, but the tornadoes with the stacking critical strike damage is already doing so much damage. You don't necessarily have to prioritize it as much. So I think I felt like going with extra life and extra survivability was the better route and the better option. Then on your totem, you're going to want to have cooldown reduction, lucky hit chance, damage reduction from enemies that are poisoned, and critical strike chance. I did get a god roll on that one. And then you're going to want to go retaliation, where your core skills deal up to 40% increased damage based on the amount of fortify. Again, with all the passives in this build, you're pretty much always fully fortified, and that just is a free 40% extra damage. The last is the Paragon board. We end up using 6 boards on this Paragon, but we only use 5 glyphs. I decided that going with the rare nodes and focusing the legendaries was going to be better than using that extra glyph spot for this build. For our glyphs, we use Territorial, we use Werewolf, Fang and Claw, Exploit, and then Earth and Sky. For the starting board, you're going to want to hit both sides for the extra maximum life and then the extra damage. We use Territorial in the first glyph spot, making sure that we get the extra damage reduction from close enemies and the extra damage to close enemies, best of both worlds glyph. We're going to move up through the left side and grab Impel, just for the willpower and then the extra early damage. The second board that we're going to use is Inner Beast, and we'll use the Werewolf glyph on this one. One thing a lot of people don't realize is the Werewolf and the Human glyph both give an extra bonus. It doesn't show it on here, but if we go into my game, go over to the Paragon board, and make our way to Werewolf. Any rare node that you make it to, you actually get extra werewolf damage on those also. So since I'm hitting 2 rare nodes in this one, I'm getting an extra 24% extra damage while I'm in werewolf form. Now, it wasn't any other ones that I could hit, but that is one of the main reasons that I decided to put werewolf there, because we are hitting 2 rare nodes. I prefer to show you guys on the planner because I don't fully have my build completely done since we're not level 100. So I'll just show you on the build site. Also, my build will be in my Discord under the build section, but also in the description, there will be a link to this website where you can find the written build. So it'll be much easier to follow along afterwards. Over here, we're going to grab Nimble for the attack speed and then the extra damage. Attack speed again is huge for this build. That way you can get your spirit back more quickly, but also it helps with putting out tornadoes, which a lot of people don't realize. We're going to hit Tenacity up here for the extra armor and then the extra maximum life. Then our third board, I messed up on the orders on here, but I do go here third. I go to Heightened Malice. Work our way up here, and then we grab the Exploit glyph. That way we're doing the extra damage to enemies that are vulnerable. and we go ahead and go down here and we snag the damage reduction from enemies that are poisoned, because enemies are generally poisoned with this build, again making you a little bit tankier. Then we work our way over here to the Thunderstruck board, where we use Fang and Claw. This board we go 2 ways, but we start out working our way up. This whole bottom section is the last section that I did. So we go up here, we grab Lightning Resilience. The Resilience isn't really what matters. You're just trying to grab that extra 6% maximum life, plus the extra 4% right there. So really 10% extra maximum life. Then we work our way over, and on this glyph, we grab Fang and Claw. That way we are doing extra damage while in werewolf form to close enemies, and then also gaining a little bit of extra damage reduction from enemies that are vulnerable, which between our tornadoes and the exploit glyph, everyone should always be vulnerable. And up here, the storm skill damage doesn't really matter a ton. More worked our way up there for the willpower. Trying to min-max this board, it was more efficient to grab the willpower up there than the little bit of extra vulnerable damage or vulnerable damage reduction. It would be nice to get those two. I just couldn't find the spare points. Then we work our way up into Lust for Carnage. You're going to go ahead and throw Earth and Sky in this one. That way we're doing the increased damage to crowd-controlled and vulnerable enemies. I go over here to grab the willpower, but also Healing Received. Healing Received is going to buff all of the abilities that we're using, because they do heal us. So it is a worthwhile stat. We're getting the 10 willpower for Earth and Sky, and then that's also getting a little bonus as well. Then we want to work our way up and grab Lust for Carnage. Critical strikes with werewolf skills restores to spirit. We're hitting crits so often that this just helps us out a lot with the sustain for our spirit. Then we're going to want to grab Wild's Call. That way we get some extra max spirit, but it's really more about all of the attack speed. Again, attack speed being so important. Now we're going to work our way over back to Heightened Malice. We don't really need a lot that's in the middle, so for min-maxing the boards, it was easier to grab the glyph down here and then work our way over and grab Heightened Malice. While there are 3 or more poisoned enemies nearby, you deal 45% increased damage. Not going to proc on bosses, obviously, but anytime you're running through dungeons and through mobs, this is just about always going to be procced. Then we also get the Poison Resilience, which is, again, more about the max life. We're gaining another 8% max life through here. Now, once you complete all of that, you're going to work your way down. Now, you could, if you wanted to, work your way to the bottom half and grab this legendary node before going up. I didn't. Personal preference kind of a thing. But we are going to grab Thunderstruck. Storm skills deal 30% increased critical strike damage against vulnerable and immobilized enemies. Most things, again, always vulnerable. So that's pretty much always going to be proccing for us. We get a little bit of extra vulnerable and critical strike damage through here. Then I do work my way back up for even more maximum life. We're going to be gaining another 8% max life up here, and then about 10% extra potion healing. The potion healing isn't like the biggest deal. It is nice, a little bonus, but it's all about that max life. That's how we did get all the way to that nice 19,000 HP before we popped the 30% HP pot, which brings us over 20,000 for those tier 100 Nightmare Dungeons. The amount of health that we have in this build with the amount of damage that we're doing is honestly truly insane. Then for the last one, we're going to want to grab Ancestral Guidance. After spending 75 spirit, you deal 30% increased damage for 5 seconds. You are spamming so many tornadoes that this is proccing all the time, especially during Grizzly Rage. So this is definitely a huge one to make sure to get. And then we just pop over here for Reclamation. 8% maximum spirit gains. We end up with about 16 extra maximum spirit, which isn't like a ton, but it is nice. And then 2 spirit on kill. When there's a ton of mobs around, you don't realize how fast that actually stacks up, allowing us to spam more tornadoes. I do hope this video helped you guys. I promise, try this tornado build out. You're going to absolutely love it. It's a nice change of pace from the Poison Landslide. Still don't know which one I prefer, but you are able to run through Nightmare Tier 100 dungeons so easily with this thing. It is pretty insane. But guys, again, if you liked the video, don't forget to like the video. Go ahead, drop a comment, let me know what you think. But most of all, make sure you sub to the channel and click that bell so you know every time I'm posting new content.